Ranger. This is Daniel Day.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm doing excellent. How are you today?
Good, that kind of rhymes. Daniel Ryan Day, how's your day?
That's right.
Reminds me of Daniel Day Lewis or something where it's all. Yeah, I'm not important enough to have three names.
Yeah. Well, Daniel Day Lewis is often who people compare me to, not because I'm good at acting or anything, but simply because that's the Daniel Day everybody knows.
Yeah,
So,
so you got to put the Ryan in the middle or they get confused, right?
that's right. Actually, what's funny is the whole reason we even put Ryan in the middle is because the first publisher I worked with, we realized if you just Google Daniel Day, I'm not coming up anywhere.
Yeah,
So we added
you're
Ryan.
lost. Yeah. After the pages and pages of Daniel Day Lewis, they'll find you.
Yeah.
And it's a
That's right.
completely different, arena that he's that he's in, doing
Yep.
doing what he does. Um, but you're in good company. He's really talented.
Yeah, no, it's not too bad, is it?
It's funny because I got your press release and only, they were talking about what you were, what your book is about, and what your message is about, and I said, I replied literally, I have a 19-year-old, a 22-year-old, and a 23-year-old. You need to send me this guy because I this is totally in my arena. Like not just as in radio, but as as a parent. This is like in myself. I remember that age. It's like 18 to 25, whatever that is. It is the I'm not a kid anymore, but adulting is scary and I have no idea what to do. And I love the title of Intentional Christian. What to do when you don't know what to do, and you need to come out with the adult version of that. So, tell me more about where you're from and how this came about.
Yeah, sure. So I'm from Western North Carolina, and I too have struggled with the question of what I'm supposed to do with my life. And so a lot of, or at least the beginning of the book, kind of follows my own journey of trying to figure that out. And of course, coming from a faith background of Christianity as well. Growing up in a church that emphasized the call of God, but having a hard time figuring out what God wanted me to do. And so I was kind of struggling with what I was supposed to do job-wise and what God's calling on my life was. And as a result, I ended up in a pretty frustrating place and got so frustrated that I decided to Google what is God's will for my life. Ended up on
when in doubt, Google. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And ended up on this list of verses, and a couple of them said, "This is God's will for you," and then went on to describe not the perfect job, which is what I expected, but a specific way of living, which was to rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances. And what I realized is that maybe instead of a specific call to a specific job, God has called us to live a certain way, and that's really the whole message of the book.
Yeah, and it's I remember I grew up in the church. Thankfully, my mom raised me as a single mom, but she was a believer and she raised me in the church, and it was great to have that background because I was already rooted in faith. But I can remember being 10 years old and going to youth camp or something like that, and this guy would go down forward and say felt called to be a pastor. This one felt called to be a missionary, and it just continued throughout youth group. And I grew up with Bart Millard in my youth group, so I was already an underachiever, and I kept thinking, where is this going? Like, what am I? And I thought, well, I gotta like make up something to say I'm called to do this because I'm making my mom look bad. Like all these other, you know what? You know what it's like at youth camp, So, and it's not that it's not real because I've watched several of them go on to do exactly what they said they were going to do, but Bart thought he was called to play college football and broke both his ankles, and he joined the choir at school. So imagine where that would have gone. I
Yeah.
mean, you're right, it's about following him. And, you know, I have two kids in college. One's out, not in college, but working. And it's man, it's a hard road for just the mom, but
Yeah.
that at that age it is, God's calling, but you feel like there's hundreds of phones in front of you. You don't know which one you're supposed to pick up. They're all ringing at the same time,
That's
and
right.
it's I think it's like for me, I thought I was going to be a teacher, and then as it came along, I started working for an insurance company and did that for several years, and then went into consulting work, and that led into radio, which I was totally shy growing up, so I had no idea I was going to do that, and worked in Christian artist management, and like just stuff just was like spidering out, and I realized at one point I was doing radio and Christian artist management at the same time, and I remember thinking, oh my goodness, like which one is my calling though? Is God calling me to do radio, or is he calling me to work with these bands? And I mean, I felt God say, I didn't say either or, you're doing both, and things were going well in both areas, and that's why I didn't know which one to choose, but it wasn't something I had to choose. I really was, I think sometimes things are for a season,
Yep.
you go through something, and maybe you are going to be a youth pastor for a while, and then he might call you go to medical school. It just
Yeah.
it's a hard road. So what is your approach, and say having a kid that is graduating high school and is saying, where do I start?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I currently work at a family entertainment center, and which is, go karts, laser tag. It's a tough job, but
Oh
somebody's got to do
yeah,
it.
exactly.
But in answer to your question, my story is very similar to yours in that I have bounced around for many different jobs, all of which I thought when I had that job that it was going to be the dream job, the thing that I was designed to do. And what I've found is, it's okay for us to plan our way, but ultimately, as Proverbs 16:9 says, God is the one who directs our steps. And as I look back and see how God has directed me to each one of these jobs, it's mind blowing sometimes to see the way that He has orchestrated things that didn't make any sense at the time to get me to where I am today. And so my story is very similar to what you're describing. And part of that is my approach with a lot of the teenagers that work for me here at the Family Entertainment Center. I have a lot of young adults. Some are in high school, some are in college. But we also work with, some older adults as well that are struggling with these questions of what to do with their life, and they feel like they too are in transition and can't figure out what they're supposed to do. And so my approach usually there, not only in sharing my own story with how God has directed my steps, but it's also just to begin to help them realize, what are they really looking for? One of the things that I found is a lot of students are looking for their identity. They want to matter. They want to do something that makes a difference in the world. And so one of the things that we, talk about there is, if we try to find our identity in anything other than our relationship with God and the fact that we're made by Him, it's always going to fall short. And so if we're trying to find a job that's going to fulfill us and give us that identity, then we're never going to find that job. And
Right.
so, that's one of the things we talk about. Another thing, and then on kind of the extreme opposite spectrum, we talk a lot about strengths and, at the same time, let's look at what you're good at and let's try to plan your way based on, how God has gifted you and some of the things that you're good at. And sometimes that can be very helpful. But either way, whether it's trying to find the right job or trying to figure out what to do or whatever, it ultimately comes down to trusting that God is directing our steps, and to be faithful to whatever He has for us to do today. Because that's really one of the things, that's probably the biggest thing I've realized in writing this book and my own journey, is that God, not only has He called us to live a certain way, but our ultimate calling is to love Him with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength, to love others, and to walk with God. And one of the best examples of that is the story of Noah, lot of times we always talk about how Noah was the one that saved the world because he built the ark. But if you look at Noah's life, that's actually a pretty small part of his story.
Right.
There's a bigger part to his story, and that comes at the very beginning where it says that Noah, who was 500 years old, according to the Bible, when God showed up, was a righteous man who walked with God. He wasn't some, pastor or youth minister, or he wasn't, starting a nonprofit and making this big difference in the world. His story was that he walked with God. And it's out of that 500 years of walking with God that God had something else for him to do, something specific. And so really, I think the emphasis in the Bible and what we should be focused on as Christians is, what does it look like to walk with God and to trust him that he'll direct us where and when he has for us to be somewhere else. So.
Yeah, it's funny. I was interviewing Mike Donahue of 10th Avenue North not too long ago, and he's somebody that's really super deep. Every time I talk to him, I feel more and more illiterate, and more like I need, and more like I need to get right back in the Bible as soon as I get off the phone. And it's funny. Their new album was called Followers, and when I asked him, I said, "Why that title?" And it's kind of generic. And what do you mean follow? Just because we're supposed to follow Jesus, obviously. And he said, "Well, it's more about the fact that we were never called to lead." And he said, "I think that's a misconception in your calling when you think somewhere, you want to be an executive, youth associate pastor, whatever the title is, or light production design or whatever it is." I mean, he said we get so tied up in leading, and he said, Christ, as he walked on the earth, himself did not, was not a leader. He said, "What I do as the Father tells me." So he literally was a follower. He wasn't even technically a leader. He led by example, and that's, I think, sometimes the hard thing to realize is that there may not be a picture. It may not be just one thing. I'm sure, obviously Noah growing up, never envisioned in his mind, well, I think I'm called to build a big boat. It's never rained, but I don't know what rain is even, like, but it may happen.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, I'm sure they thought he was nuts. And I think that's, him just following, and Matthew just getting up and no questions. He says, "Follow me," and he just gets up and leaves his expensive job. It was really, high, ranking job. And I think that's it. It's about just the hardest thing I think for us to do is just follow him, love others, love God. And it's, if we do that, we literally, we let go of that control, and we take our hands off the steering wheel, and put it on cruise, put it on his thing. But, we always white knuckle the wheel every once in a while and run the car off the road. But thankfully, he's, always there to pull us out of the ditch. And, I think this is such a incredible book. Your website is danielryanday.com. So is that where all of your information is for people to look up anything about you or your book?
Yep. Okay. They can find it there. I've actually updated the URL as well. Daniel Ryan Day will get you there, but intentionalchristianity.com it's the same website. Also on Facebook, or Instagram or Twitter, people can connect with me there, but it's available wherever books are sold, so Amazon and places like that too.
I see another little green book on your website called 10 Days Without. What is that about?
Yeah, so that was kind of came out of a similar struggle. So what I have found, not only in my own life but with many of the people that I've talked to, is that there's two major questions that people struggle with, and one of them we've already discussed, which is what am I supposed to do with my life? Whether that's what is my calling or what is my job. People want to know, what am I supposed to do with my life? The other question that people really struggle with, specifically Christians, although there's a lot of non-Christians that struggle with this too, is how do I live out my faith? What does that look like? And for non-Christians, it would be, how do I make a difference in the world? And so those are the two major questions. And so Intentional Christian kind of catalogs that journey of, okay, what's God's will and calling for my life? What does that look like? 10 Days Without is much more a practical way to begin the process of, okay, what does living out my faith look like? What does it mean to follow Jesus? And so where it came from was I was working for a ministry at the time and realizing that a lot of my life was not, well, I read a passage. It was Matthew chapter 25, where Jesus describes two groups of people. The one group gets it. They get what it means to follow God, and the other ones don't. And the group that gets it, he calls them sheep. And the group that doesn't get it, he calls them the goats. And the group that gets it are people that look out for those who don't have clothes, and they give them clothes. Jesus says, I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you let me in. I was naked and you clothed me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. I was sick and you came to be with me. And so we have this passage that describes these people that are very active in the way that they are living out their faith in God. And so I realized in reading that passage, I'm not doing any of those things. I don't know people that don't have food or don't have a drink or don't have clothes. And so I wanted to try to figure out a way to do that. And so I came up with kind of a somewhat silly experiment, but where I would go 10 days without a certain necessity, like using my legs or speech or shoes, and then connect that with the problem in the world, like modern day slavery or people affected by disabilities or those who are in poverty, and then write about my experience for 10 days and then recruit volunteers or collect money or collect items to help with those issues in the world. And never intended for it to be a book, but a publisher found the blog and reached out to me and asked if I'd be willing to write a book. So that's how that part happened. But it was really just an exploration for me of, okay, what could it look like for me to try to actually take Jesus seriously and do some of the things that he said for me to do?
That's really a profound, viewpoint of how to empathize with others. And I think if you don't understand the need, or at least understand being in need, you don't feel compelled to do something. You don't feel so compelled. I tell you, I see this little, one of the little things that you say here, I think is a great bumper sticker. It says, good intentions are cans of paint that could have become amazing works of art, but never did. It's kind of the other take on, the road, road is, paved with good intentions. I think that's an incredible thing, because one of my moments that, I felt I kind of hit that kind of point in my life where I felt like, I get it and I want to help, and I don't know how. And I listened to Switchfoot and their song, I dare you to move. And I asked him one time about that song, and he said, honestly, it was me talking to my lazy self, just saying, I dare you to just get up, get up, put one foot in front of the other and help somebody do something, make a difference, and quit being so stagnant. And, it's kind of that same thing. It's sometimes that first step, and that this experiment may be a way for people to discover, other ways. They may, go without shoes, or, without using their legs, or whatever it be for 10 days, but it might open up several other areas where they realize, you know what, I never thought about it, but this also is a need that is not being met. And, you can get involved by giving money, giving your time. There's so many different ways,
Yep.
but the intentions might be there, but if you never step out in faith and do anything, it never, like you said, never becomes that amazing work of art that God could have painted because you weren't
Yep.
willing to, get the paint can out and start working. And
Yep.
it doesn't take profound measures. It just, you start small.
Yep.
Start with
Right.
what you know. I really think this book is incredible. Do you do speaking engagements as well for students?
I do.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, I sure do. I've spoken at a conference, a few conferences, and I've done some spiritual emphasis weeks for Christian schools. I've spoken at a staff retreat for a larger nonprofit out in Colorado that works with homeless ministries. So it's been really cool to have opportunities to go and share the message that God's laid on my heart, and hopefully it's helpful to others that are asking some of those same questions that I did, and God was faithful to show up. And maybe it's not the answer, but it's been a good model for me to begin, living out my faith. So
And that first step sometimes is
the hardest.
whether you're 18 or you're 80. Sometimes if you never answer those questions when you're in that 18 to 24 age or whatever it is, then that question still is nagging at you when you're 50 years or 60 years old or whatever. If you never really answer that, whatever that will of God is for your life,
Yep.
it will continue to be there as an unanswered question. And so if you want to get a hold of him, go to either intentionalchristianity.com or danielryanday.com altogether. I see you still blog as well.
Yep.
There's lots of different things, including the ability to buy his book, which is being intentional as a Christian. And there's some really great information on there. And especially, I think parents, if you have kids this age, buy the book, read it together, or read it to help them, or give it, if they actually do, will read something, and then I say buy a handful of them and gift them to, kids in youth group or something like that. I think this would be a great youth group project for somebody to gift a book for every kid that's in the youth group. It just doesn't take a whole lot to, some people aren't willing to come out and say they really don't know what to do and they want to know what to do. So this is a great way, kind of a non-attacking, kind of way to, just hand them a book and talk to them about, hey, I went through this at this certain age, and I think this would help. And that's another way we can walk out in faith and do something to help other people. And you never know what during that younger age, if they get it then, if they come into their own reasoning, then it will save them so much trouble, and God can have so many more years of doing work and glorifying him, if we just submit at the first moment possible, whether you're 18, you're 50, you're 80, whatever, today is the day. It's
That's
every
right.
day. I'm really glad to talk to you. This is a really dear to my heart subject because it's something I went through at that age. And I think you kind of always go back to it. You're kind of always
Yeah.
rechecking where you're at. But I appreciate you, and I'm glad that you have at a young age kind of put all this out here and speaking and putting out, blogs and videos and information for young people. So I will share your information, and if there's anything else we can do to help promote that, let me know. And I'm just grateful for you to spend the time with us and talking to us about your ministry.
Oh well, thank you so much. It's absolutely my pleasure, and it's dear to my heart too because it's a struggle that I've had, and what I've found is so much hope and freedom um, that God has given through realizing that He's actually told us a lot about what His expectations for our lives are. It just was a lot different than I expected it to be. So thank you so much for the opportunity to share that and be a part.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it was an honor to talk to you, and I will be getting that book because I'm going to give it to my kids either way. So Merry Christmas.
Hey,
It
that sounds good. And if
makes
your
a
kids
great.
want any more encouragement, they can always reach out to me. I'd be more than able to, or more than willing and excited to help in any way I can. So.
Oh, thank you so much. I may do that. Don't say that and just throw it out
Oh, I
there.
mean it. I mean it. So,
Well, thank you so much for everything, and we'll be talking to you soon and keeping in touch with you. And I'm gonna get a hold of the book so I can, see if it doesn't do something to, my kids are in great places, but I know that's always still a struggle. It's a constant back and forth. Am I on the right path? Wherever it's at, it's not
yep.
just college, but their personal life and everything. So I think it's a great book. I'm probably going to get the other one too. For myself, I think I would love to see how that unfolds. So thank you so much. And it was a, I was going to say, I literally was going to say Daniel Day Lewis, but thank you, Daniel Ryan Day. Daniel, I'm just going to say Daniel. Let's just say that. But thank you so much. And again, we'll be talking to you soon.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you so much.